Hello, wow, am I doing all that?
Done much more. I could have said lots more.
No wonder I'm tired already.
You just got
Need a
back
break?
from a long trip, did you not?
I'm always getting back from a long trip, Catherine.
What
I'm away more than I'm here.
what kinds of journeys do you take? What was the last journey like?
Well, this last one, I went across Russia, actually all the way from Moscow to Nizhny Novgorod, Yekaterinburg, Novosibirsk, and then through Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to Turkey and then home again. So it was a very long trip, and basically I was looking for information on my family because my great uncle Yakov Sverdlov, as you may know, was the first president of the Soviet Union, and I was invited to Russia to actually do a book tour because my very popular book Blue Blood, True Blood was translated into Russian, and so the publisher there asked me to do lectures at the book stores across Russia, and that's what I did.
That's great. Did you find out some information?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it was more than I anticipated because, wow, they were some heavy people. My great uncle was the top leader of the Soviet Union, the highest level of Soviet government. He's buried in the Kremlin Wall. He was the first person to be buried in the Kremlin Wall. Right.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was quite a character. And apparently my great-grandfather, who was his father, was in charge of a lot of organizations in Russia. So it was quite a lot of information.
It's interesting to see how far things go back.
Yes, absolutely. I have a lot to assimilate compared to what I learned.
You will. And nothing was a mistake, I'm sure, because it made you who you are today.
Well, that's true.
Why don't you begin by telling everyone some of your other books?
Well, one of my autobiography is Montauk, Alien Connection, which is actually part of a series of books about the Montauk Project, but Alien Connection was my autobiography and my memories of that project. And Blue Blood, True Blood was actually a sequel to that, which describes my subsequent experiences as well as world history. And then I also have Healer's Handbook, which has a lot of healing techniques and a dictionary on hyperspace symbols and archetypes. I also have Hyperspace Helper, which is a collection of visualizations and deprogramming techniques. There's Stewart Says. There's also As Ye Sow, So Shall Ye Reap, Healing of the Mind. I have like a series of 12 children's books. I can't even remember all the names.
That's really great. I didn't know you did children's books. How cute.
Yeah, well, I said I act like a child, so I might as well write like one.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with being 5 at heart.
Hey.
I still am. I'm proud of it. Because being, joyous and having fun is close to the heart chakra, and that's what more people should concentrate on.
I agree.
Get a lot happier. I know you do. I'm sure you do. Would you like to now go to some of your involvement in these projects? How far back do you remember them, Stewart?
Well, I remember all of it, unfortunately.
Oh.
The Montauk Project, the reason I got involved in that, it's a couple of reasons. First of all was my family history, what I just mentioned to you, because of the connection to the Soviet Union. The U.S. government was concerned about loyalty issues. And so they took me into the Montauk Project from 1970 to 1983, which was located at the eastern end of Long Island at the old Montauk Air Force Base where the SAGE radar was located. And as SAGE radar became obsolete, they converted the base into mind control, weaponry, genetic experimentation, programming, you name it, they did it there. And also, because of my father's involvement during the 1950s in a base underneath El Paso, Texas, that he was used in experimentation as well. So it goes back a very long way. And I was used in a lot of different projects during the Montauk experience. They did genetic manipulation, alien contact, hyperspace, communications into other dimensions. And a lot of the experiments or projects that we see now in this year, in this century, were based on what they learned at the Montauk Project, and were connected to projects across the world, especially in Britain and in the Soviet Union.
That tower was called Tower 425, was it not?
I believe so, but we knew it as the Delta T antenna.
And it was made, in your belief, to harness and alter DNA or close or open DNA and for mind control purposes.
Well, the antenna was actually a design from an alien civilization from Sirius A, from which the government received a lot of high technology. The Delta T was used for when you pass electromagnetic energies through it. It does connect to other realities or parallel universes, both physical and non-physical. And they use that to guide the other equipment into wormholes and vortices, and to connect to different time and spaces, universally.
I'm also told that less than 1%, to the best of your recollection, has survived these testings that they used to do to humans at Montauk. So it's pretty rare to find someone who's a survivor.
Well, that's true. I was told that less than 1% survived, and of that less than 1%, very few were able to function in society. It's a rarity to find anyone who was from that time period.
I find it interesting that you say that they used mostly men, mostly boys or men, because you were the ripe age of 13 when you can recall being used for these projects. You say that male energy projects out and female energy absorbs.
Correct, that's right.
Can you go into that a little bit?
Well, this was actually learned not only through alien information, but it was enhanced by the work that the Nazis did during World War II, during their experimentations in the concentration camps. And it's known that male energies amplify and female energies pull in. So as far as mind control and programming is concerned, they concentrated more on the male because it was more of a projection out that they could then use to beam to the rest of the population on the Earth. But they did use females for reproductive purposes as well as for sexual rituals.
And most of that base, for lack of a better word, was underground, correct?
Well, all of that was underground. And
So just the tower was above ground?
Well, there were a lot of buildings above ground. It was an Air Force base, and there were buildings and bunkers and all kinds of things above ground, but you couldn't see all the layers underneath. And the underground actually was started back in 1799 by George Washington, who wanted to start building an area for supplies in case the British invaded. And then over the centuries, they kept adding and adding until it was very deep.
To your knowledge, Stewart, did they do any animal testing there as well?
Most of the animal testing was off the coast in a place called Plum Island, which you may have heard about.
I have.
And it's still in existence, and that's where they did most of the experimentation on, let's say, non-human subjects.
Very interesting. You were used for 13 years in the Montauk experiments?
Yeah, 1970 to 1983, and then when the project crashed on August 12th, 1983, it was kind of like being unplugged from the wall and not knowing what the heck to do.
I know that you said that some of the memories you have are of running naked through the halls, the underground tunnels, if you will, of Montauk. And I had a question. Do you think that they kind of induced you in the astral realm and put fear into you? So what I'm saying is possibly they made you think that you were being chased all the way through the Montauk base in effort to tap into your fear, to release those chemicals in your brain so they could then tap into more toys in your brain. Because when our brain is in a fear state, it produces certain chemicals.
Yes, adrenochrome is one of the chemicals that they desired to harvest. But actually, those memories were me trying to escape. I mean, I did try to break free and run, and that's what I did. And I think that there were times when they wanted me to do that because it was a question of being shown that you would never get away and you would be captured. So,
I see.
So they kind of did that. It was kind of a joke on for them because there's no place I really could have gone. But I do remember running and breaking free and trying to hide. That I do remember.
Yeah, I had a thought that maybe they put you into that fear state so that they could tap into different dimensions in your consciousness.
They did that with narcotics and electromagnetic frequencies. They didn't have to do it any other way.
When did you recognize that you started having these flashbacks?
Oh, gosh.
Your memories came back.
I never lost my memories. I always had them.
Even as a child?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
And what my issue was, I could not reconcile my daily so-called normal life with the memories that I had that were kind of parallel to them.
If they, in fact, break you down to build you back up again the way they want to mentally, right?
Well, they fracture the personality into compartments, and then they reprogram each of those compartments into subalters, partial personalities, full personalities, whatever they want to put in that person.
Let's go back to the Philadelphia experiment for a moment, if you don't mind. You say in one of your videos that what they did was create a time loop between 1943 and 1983, and they used Tesla technology to do that. Do you mind going into that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't think they did that on purpose. I think it happened. I don't like to use the word accidentally, but they didn't plan on that happening. And that's because the energies from those two time periods were so identical that they matched up with each other.
Wow.
And so they created the loop.
So hyperspace energetic levels is what...
Yes, right. That's frequency.
Right. Frequency is everything, Stewart.
Yes.
So what kind of abilities did you gain from being in those experiments, and what kind of abilities do you think you came to this world with as a child?
Well, interesting question, because as a child, I was able to see those who had departed or those who passed on, very much like the kid in Sixth Sense movie. And I always had an awareness of other lifetimes, even though I had no reference to what that was. And so at Montauk Project, what they did with their experimentation was to open up a percentage of the 90% of the brain that's not used by most human beings, and part of the 97% of the DNA, which is not used by most human beings. So you can imagine when you open up those abilities, what a human being can do. And quite frankly, humans, if they reach their full potential, would be like gods. They'd be able to do all kinds of things, but over the millennia, this has been blocked out for us.
So did they use the Montauk chair to augment these abilities? And I think they hand-chose certain people for their psychic abilities and then used the Montauk chair to bring those out and augment them? Is that kind of what happened at the project?
Well, the Montauk chair, again, was a technology that came from Sirius A star system. And what it did was download the brain waves into a computer that was like a step-up transformer that then amplified the signals and grounded them so that they could create something physically that the mind would not be able to do without equipment on an easy basis. So, for example, if they told the psychic on the chair to create a vortex from Earth to a specific alternate reality, he would think of that. That thought pattern would go into the computer and through the chair. It would be amplified, and the energetic frequencies would be patterned so that it became established energetically and could be used. In effect, the thought became a reality.
I've heard that the chair was actually the control chair of an alien spacecraft, and it was altered to work in this project. And I guess they added Tesla tech to that as well, and that's how they created this chair.
There were technologies from many civilizations where the pilots of vehicles would sit in such type of chairs, and then the chair would respond or give commands to the ship, which would be almost like a living organism, so that it would fly and or go into certain frequencies and dimensions. So yes, in a way that's true. But this particular chair was designed for mind control programming and to create connections to other realities.
Okay.
There's a question in the chat room, Stuart, since we seem to be on intelligent life forces. They're asking, does Stewart know about this black intelligent goo that's being found all over the globe, supposedly deposited here by ETs?
Yes, the intelligent oil, as they call it. In fact, this past summer, I was in Britain, and I did research on that because the British are very much involved in that particular type of information. Apparently, the source of this, or the main place they found it, was the Falkland Islands back in the early 80s, which is what caused the war between Britain and Argentina in reality. This particular intelligent oil, when kept underneath the pressure of an ocean, underneath the bottom of an ocean, it is inert. And then when it is released through drilling or pulling out into the atmosphere, that's when it becomes active.
Wow, so it sort of comes alive when it gets oxygen?
Yes, and quite frankly, that is why they want people to use petroleum products in their food and clothing and everything you use, so that you're constantly in connection with this item. Nobody really knows if it was brought here or if it was created on Earth or if it's artificial or natural. Nobody really knows that. So to say it was brought here by ETs, nobody knows that. So basically, the governments are using it to control populations.
Part of the transhumanization agenda.
Yeah.
Kind of like what they showed in Prometheus a little bit, that goo that in the end ended up infecting people.
Wow. Good point.
Yeah. Hollywood movies, in their own way, give you the information that the Illuminati want you to have in a way that you can accept.
Yes, I say it's like they put it out there in plain sight, and if you're not smart enough to figure it out, shame on you. It's kind of like their karmic pass for them. As long as they disclose somehow.
It's what they call their legal out. It's not their problem if you don't understand it or see it, but they told you.
Right. Someone is asking, how is black goo intelligent?
Well, it thinks, it moves, it has an agenda. You know, how is it intelligent? How is anything intelligent? It's imbued with the consciousness, like everything else.
One of my favorite theories that you did is the blue blood, true blood. That is what introduced me to you, and I have to tell you, I've seen that probably like 4 times over the past couple of years. Would you mind going into some of that right now? Because I think it's a fascinating topic. I know it's a rather long topic to talk about.
Well, it's about world history.
Yeah. Basically, it breaks everything down.
And by the way, very shortly I'll be releasing a new book called True World History, which is even more comprehensive than Blue Blood. It continues on in more detail.
So let's talk about Blue Blood, True Blood, conflict, and creation.
Yes, well, that's a big story. And in it, I describe how the world, this planet, was colonized by androgynous reptilian beings in a continent that was called Lemuria. And these beings drove their vehicle into our solar system and parked it in orbit around our planet, and we call that vehicle the moon. The moon is the only object in space that does not spin. It faces one direction at all times, like a vehicle that's parked in orbit, and that's exactly what it is. It's artificial. And even NASA analysis of the material shows that it did not come from the solar system. So that's been proven, and it's hollow. And when you send a sonic resonance off the surface of the moon, it pings as if it were hollow. If it was a solid object, it would thump. So the moon pings.
You're also a believer in hollow earth, and so am I. And I'm from the belief that all these underground tunnel systems, and there's tunnels in the ocean, I believe, and that's how they can get around without being seen.
Well, it's part of planetary science on how certain worlds are formed. And planets like Earth are formed when the molten material from the star, or our sun, is ejected out into space. And that molten material, as it's ejected out, starts to spin. And because space is cold, the outside of the molten material starts to cool and harden. but the inside, being molten, starts to spin because it's still liquid. And then as that spins, the liquid material moves to the side, as if, if you spin a glass, you'll see the liquids move to the side. And then that causes pressure inside, and a lot of the material then pushes out through openings that become polar holes or openings in the North and South Pole. And then the inside starts to harden and cool, and that creates a shell on the internal side of the globe. So we have an external shell and an internal shell, and in between is the magma or molten material that's trapped in between the hardened shells. And then the shells start to move and grind as the globe spins in space, and this causes shifting and fracturing, which is why we have tectonic plates. And where the two inner and outer plates push against one another, we start to see volcanoes, because the magma is then pushed towards one surface or another in order to relieve the pressure. And so inside, in the very center of the hollow space, is the leftover molten material, or which would be like magma, suspended in the middle, which many people call an internal sun. But it's really magma suspended in the middle through gravitational fields. And that's how the Earth and many other planets are formed. Gas planets are different. Gas planets are just liquid and gas, but solid planets are formed in the way I just described.
I always get a vibe that, and I'm probably wrong, but I always get a vibe that from the magma that you mentioned, that the gases from that, when they release from the poles, is what creates the northern lights.
Absolutely, and also depending on atmospheric conditions, the aurora borealis is also a reflection of that inner or magma that's in the middle. So that's really what the aurora borealis is.
That's what I always thought.
Yeah, it's true.
Just seemed to be the way it was. Cool, I'm glad.
Amazing.
That is amazing.
Wow.
I always jokingly say, you always say, you don't say it like this, but I think I have a few different DNA species from different ET races mixed up in my human. If you won't mind telling the audience how you believe that we all start out as reptilians in vitro.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long story. It goes back to what I just mentioned, the colonization of Lemuria by androgynous reptilian beings from the Draco star system. And they were actually here first, and they were here for thousands of years before human or mammalian colonists came here and colonized the continent that's known as Atlantis. And since reptilians and mammalians are not supposed to live in the same environment because they don't get along, there was wars between the two continents, and they were quite violent. And so in order to create peace, they decided to create a third race, a synthesis between the two, which is what mankind became. And that's why in the Bible it says, "Let us make man in our image." And that, why is it plural? Why do they have every reference to God in the Bible, in the Old Testament, is plural? It's not a singular. It's always we and us and our. And so when you look at the gestation of a human fetus in the womb, you will see that for the first 6 to 8 weeks, it looks like a reptilian androgynous being. And only after that do mammalian genetics start to activate, and then there's a sexual differentiation. And that is because the DNA is following the sequence in which it was placed. When the agreement was made between the reptilians and the humans, the agreement was that they would use an androgynous reptilian body as a baseline, and then you would add the mammalian genetics to that. And that's exactly how the human fetus is formed. And that's also why we have the allegorical story of Adam and Eve being created from the rib of Adam. And that's because it's basically the story of how a reptilian body was broken down to male and female components to create humankind. And we can see this in our bodies. We have a reptilian brainstem. We have skin that wrinkles and peels. We have a reptilian lymphatic system. We have a mammalian four-chambered heart with a reptilian arterial system leading to it. So just studying the human body shows beyond doubt that we are a synthesis of two different species, which really does not belong together.
Right.
Yeah.
I always joke when I get a sunburn now, and like a few days later I start feeling, I say I'm peeling like a proper reptilian, aren't I?
Yes, exactly. And you got to be careful with that stuff because the sun, now people don't realize this, the sun is not hot. And that's why vehicles can pass in and out of the sun without burning up. It's cold fusion.
Wow.
The only thing that creates heat is the reflection of the light in an atmosphere against the ground, which is why the ground is hot, and the higher you go in the atmosphere, it gets colder. If the sun was hot, space would be hot, but space is icy cold.
Interesting. I know that you also believe that all life forms on Earth was brought here and created here.
That's good. Nothing was natural to this planet because the Earth was a water planet. It was only, I have to go back even further in time now, because the Earth was really in the second position from the Sun, and then was Mars, which was a very Earth-like planet at the time within atmosphere and oceans, which they're only now telling you is true. And then there was a huge planet after Mars, which was also very Earth-like, called Maldek, and then came Jupiter, Saturn, etc. And so the reptilians, when they attacked the Lyrian star system, caused the Lyrian humans to disperse to many places, including this solar system, and they colonized Mars and Maldek. And when the reptilians found the colonies, they sent an ice comet into our solar system to destroy the civilizations here. And as the ice comet passed the planet Uranus, it caused Uranus to flip on its axis, which is why Uranus is the only known planet that rotates north to south instead of east to west, or west.
Probably also why it wreaks such havoc when it's in full swing, too.
Yeah, astrologically. And then as the ice comet came close to Saturn, Maldek, and Mars, the geomagnetic pull of those three objects caused Maldek to explode, which is why we have an asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. And then the ice comet started to go into a pull on Mars and pull the oceans and atmosphere off of Mars, causing that population to go inside the planet. And then finally, it went into a rotational spin with the Earth and pushed the Earth into the third position from the Sun, and also ripped most of the water off and polarized it at the north and south poles, which became the ice caps. And then the ice comet took up the second position in the sun, from the Sun, and the light caused the heating on the ice comet to create clouds around what we now call Venus. That's why Venus has a cloud cover, because it was once covered in ice that melted and evaporated.
What do you think about the rings of Saturn, Stewart?
Well, the rings of Saturn were a result of the explosion of Maldek, and the small pieces that were flung into space were captured by the gravitational pull of Saturn, creating the rings. And actually, there are even Uranus has faint rings around it. And also, all the moons of Jupiter and Saturn are remnants of that planet Maldek.
So some think that the rings of Saturn are getting wider because there's been photographs of big ships up there, literally as wide as the rings of Saturn.
Well,
something that's like, I don't know, exhaust, for lack of a better word, from them just spinning and going around and around and around of the planet.
There is an effort or a project to change Saturn, and they tested this on Jupiter in the early 1990s with the String of Pearls comet, if you remember that then went to hit the planet and started to heat it up. And it was the idea that they were creating a second sun. But actually that was a test, and the real target is Saturn. And that's why we see changes now in Saturn, because they're heating that up to become a new second sun.
Interesting. Do you mind talking about the texts that were found that were over 100,000 years old?
Oh, the Vedic information.
Yeah.
They actually describe the wars between Atlantis and Lemuria, and even describe nuclear explosions, and even describe how to build a vimana, which is a vehicle that could fly into the atmosphere and even into outer space. And in fact, not long ago, and I forgot what university it was in Europe, I believe, that took the instructions and they built one of these things. And I believe it's on display.
The Lemurian descent is said to be from Hindu. Is that because of what they read that was on these texts?
Well, the Hindu is the descendant of Lemurian.
Right.
And that is why there's a caste system in India, because it describes perfectly the caste system of the Lemurian civilization. And yeah, there's a lot of information in India and in Tibet and in a lot of parts of Southeast Asia that describe the Lemurian culture.
Interesting. I don't mean to keep asking to go back to this, but I think it's information that a lot of people haven't heard yet. Do you mind talking about the reptilians versus the humans?
Well, the reptilians, as I mentioned, they're androgynous, meaning they're male and female in the same body. There's no sexual differentiation. They come from a star system called Draco, which actually is a very vast empire. They feel superior to mammalian life forms for several reasons. One reason is that reptilian DNA does not change over eons of time. It remains pretty much unchanged, which to their perspective means they're already perfect, so they don't have to change, whereas mammalian genetics constantly have to evolve and adapt,
right.
Indicating to them that it's inferior. Also, the fact that the reptilians are androgynous, to them, closely is associated with the neutrality of the God mind, because God mind has no gender. So since the reptilians have no gender, they're more like the God mind, as compared to mammals that have a gender and are weaker because they're only half of what they should be. So these are some of the reasons that they have for their feelings of superiority and an agenda to go through creation and assimilate all into their culture.
And that goes back to Iraq and Kuwait?
Well, that goes back to Sumer. Which, that was, the Sumerian civilization actually just, began 7,000 years ago. Nothing led up to it. It just suddenly appeared. And that they were basically human colonists from the Martian planet that couldn't stay there anymore. And by that time, Lemuria had sunk, Atlantis had sunk. Many of the reptilians had gone into the inner Earth, and they took an opportunity to then start a hybridization program on the Sumerians to retake the surface. And that is why when you look at Sumerian art and you look at their god and goddess, Nimrod and Semiramis, you see that they have human and reptilian features. They're kind of hybrids.
Androgynous.
Yes. And because reptilians have a copper-based blood, when copper oxidizes in the atmosphere, it turns a bluish-green color, and that's why they were referred to as blue bloods.
Right. I know you also believe that Marduk is also known as Nibiru.
Yeah, it depends on the civilization, and it's the same planet.
What do you think we're going to see with Nibiru?
I think it's gone. 2003, April 2003 was blown up. Nothing left of it.
Wow. Were you downloaded that information, or did you remote view it? How do you know that?
Well, I know that because the information was given to me by people in the intelligence service. There was a particle beam accelerator located on one of the moons of Jupiter. As Nibiru passed Jupiter, the accelerator was activated, and the planet was blown up. And NASA had a sun cam, and you could see on the sun cam huge chunks of something flying into the sun. And for several years, even up until recently, we have had a lot of meteors flying by the Earth, suddenly appearing, going between the Earth and the Moon, becoming a danger, supposedly, and this was remnants of the Nibiru blowing up. And that is also when we invaded Iraq and went to Baghdad, because underneath Baghdad are ancient stargates connected to Nibiru, and the government did not want them passing through there. So they occupied this location. That's one of the main reasons that they attacked or invaded Iraq.
Is there anything still going on at the Gulf of Aden, Stewart?
That's a bunch of malarkey. There's no, I was there twice. There's nothing there. There is actually a submarine volcano, which is active there, and that's what's causing the earthquakes and the problems in that Horn of Africa. There's no Stargate. There's no opening there. It's just a volcano.
So all those Google Earth images were fake?
Well, I don't know what Google images you're referring to, but I was physically there more than once, and there's nothing there but a volcano.
Okay, fair enough. If you don't mind, let's start talking about different ETs that are on this Earth as we speak. I know you think that you talk about the mermaids and mermen, that sort of thing. What kind
Well, those are not extraterrestrial creatures. Those were genetically created creatures from the Atlantean time period when they blended dolphin DNA with human DNA and created them.
Okay.
But they do still exist, and I did a whole series of information on that a few months ago when I was in South Africa, and reported on a shark, great white shark, that had been caught off the coast of Cape Town. And when they cut it open, they found the remains of what looked like a merman in there, complete with weapons and spears and that kind of thing.
Wow.
So those things do exist, and they've been recorded by suboceanic microphones communicating with dolphins and whales. But they can be violent. They are not peaceful and friends of humanity. They're actually quite violent. And Japanese fishing trawlers have actually picked them up in their nets on occasion, and they have been they've attacked the crews. So, not to be don't go looking for them and swimming with them. You'll be sorry.
Yeah.
But as far as look, there are literally dozens of alien beings or groups that have bases or establish some kind of foothold here on the planet, both on the surface and under the surface and under the ocean. We are in a mixed neighborhood, so to speak. There's a lot here.
I like what Foster Gamble said when he was on. He said, we are literally in the Star Wars bar.
Well, yeah, it really is. And they're not friendly. There's nobody here that's full of light and peace. I'm sorry to all the New Agers out there. But no, it's not like that at all. And nobody's here to uplift mankind and make us, part of a galactic, group. No. They're here to use the resources. And by the way, human beings are part of the resources. It's location, location, location. We are in a solar system that's at the very edge of one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way galaxy, and therefore we stick out into deep space. And so when you are looking to occupy a galaxy, the best thing that you could do in such a situation is occupy all those points on the spirals so that you contain everything that's inside, and that's what's happening in our solar system. In addition, because of where we are at the edge, we have greater interdimensional access because there's less density here than there is towards the center of the galaxy. So it's very easy to go from one frequency to another here.
Do you think that they maybe used to control the people in a negative way, or you think they still are?
Well, they always have done that. Mankind has been controlled since day zero.
How much of that do you think is a MyLab situation?
Well, I think that's the technological aspect of it is, let's say, in the last 70 years or so. But in the last 30 years, it's gotten quite intense, so that now the entire planet is surrounded by satellites that transmit scalar waves, and which are amplified by ground antenna, like the cell phone towers and microwave towers you see, so that the entire population of 7.3 billion people is on a daily basis mind controlled every second.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because my girlfriend of mine moved to northern Ontario in Canada where there is no cell towers and no cell service, and she cannot believe how much better she thinks and sleeps because that interference is just not there.
Well,
That's very telling to me.
I have some very bad news for both of you, but northern Ontario is filled with underground bases, and while there may not be cell phone towers, there's a lot going on underneath and also under Hudson Bay, and there's no place on the earth that's exempt from the ELF transmissions.
Wow.
So I think much of what she feels is psychological.
Could be. You also believe that Bigfoot is multidimensional, and I kind of tend to think that as well.
There are different kinds, you know.
Yes, of course.
You know, there is a kind that's created by alien beings. There's a kind that were created by the Atlanteans that crossed human beings with bear genetics. And where I just came from in Siberia, in the Altai Mountains, there's a kind of creature there which is known as a Bigfoot as well, but in fact, it is a remnant of the Neanderthal population.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I forget what the name of that is.
Yeah, it's a local tribal name there, but they know about them. The Soviet government actually captured one in the 1930s and again in the 1950s. It's documented.
Wow.
Yes, and I'm going back in June on another expedition to the Altai Mountains.
Wow. Let us know what happens when you get back.
Yeah, maybe I'll bring one back with me.
Send it to my house. I'll sort them out. How about the werewolf?
Yeah, all these things, the werewolf, vampire, all these creatures are actually descendants of, again, the Atlantean hybridization programs, which went on for thousands of years. They crossed all kinds of genetics, human with insect, human with animal, human with alien. They created a lot of different creatures that we have heard of in legend, which actually still exist. But I want to qualify something here and say that the vampiric or vampire type of creature is actually natural. And we have vampire bats, we have mosquitoes, we have leeches. There are many creatures that exist that naturally need the blood of others.
Energy vampires that are humans?
Exactly, yes, exactly correct. So I want to just let the audience know that the vampire style or pattern is natural in existence.
How about the Jersey Devil and the Mothman and the Chupacabra?
The New Jersey Devil was actually interdimensional. It was not a creature that physically lived in the southern forest of New Jersey, but actually there's a vortex there that is not far from the Army base, Fort Dix, that goes interdimensionally, and that's where that creature came from.
Wow. I've seen some footage from a Paranormal State show. They actually got something that looked very much like the Jersey Devil on infrared photography.
Yeah, and it would be on infrared because it would not be physical all the time. It would be energetic.
Wings came up, and it had a horse's head, is all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
How about the Mothman? Is that multidimensional?
Yeah, the Mothman of Ohio and West Virginia, that was part of a government hybridization program. Basically, that was a cross between a moth and a human being. And the reason the government did that was it was trying to create spy-like creatures that could fly into territories without being picked up on radar. That might even scare the population, so it wouldn't be, attacked. But that did not work out very well.
What are your thoughts? I know that the South American Chupacabra and the one that's in the United States are quite different, depending on who you speak to. What are your thoughts on both of those different types of species?
Again, those were genetic experiments. Actually, that was an alien creation, not a human one, because there are alien groups that are deficient in hormonal levels and require blood in order to survive. And so they send these creatures out into the world to download blood and then bring it back to these alien beings who then use it.
You're speaking of the one in South America, right?
Well, the South America, Central America, the Caribbean, even the southern United States.
Some say it's got red eyes, too, and sucks the blood out of, like, goats and and things like that.
Yes.
So that would make sense. How about the southern United States chupacabra? It was tested to be wolf and coyote DNA, I believe. Do you think that could be just a government experiment?
Yes, and I think it was a decoy. I think they purposely created something like that to be found and shot so that it could be on the news. And they would say, oh, you see, that's what it is. It's like a coyote with mange or, a dog that's genetically weird. That's for public consumption. It's a diversion.
That makes sense. We are at the top of the hour, Stewart. Do you mind if we go into our song break at this time?
Sure. You want me to sing, or are you going to have your own song?
As long as you mute, you can sing as much as you want.
Oh, that's nice. You're lucky you're over there, Catherine.
Okay. We are back. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. We have Stewart Swerdlow here for the second half of the show. Still with us, Stewart?
Yeah, of course I am.
Great. We're having a great time with you so far. I really appreciate you coming and being on the show tonight.
I appreciate you having me here.
It's an honor. It really is. We have a caller/friend standing by in queue. His name is Jeff Harvey. He wanted to ask you a couple questions.
Sure, okay.
Hey, Jeff. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Good talking to you all. Nice job, Stewart.
Thank you, Jeff.
My team has been watching you for quite some time. You may or may not know I'm ex-Intel, and I was part of the watcher group watching Intel. And we've been privy to some of your private communications, and I must say you've got some really interesting points you've made over the years, and we like a lot of the information that we're hearing.
Okay.
There was a couple of questions my team had to ask, and one of them was something you referenced in a private comm to your newsletter crew at one point about an anomaly off of the California coast. Could you go into that a little?
Well, there's been several. Which one are you referring to?
I believe it had to do with frequency.
Well,
60 hertz, perhaps?
Yeah, that was, there's been, again, so many of them. There was one that was off the coast of San Francisco. Actually, there was two off the coast of San Francisco, and there was one off the coast of San Diego, and several off the coast of Los Angeles. The one I think you're referring to was a burst, an ELF burst, that came from a submarine base located just south of the Catalina Islands that was transmitting something to a vehicle in space.
Okay. And there was something else that was being used to affect something on the mainland, and I could have sworn there was something to do with 60 hertz on that. Do you remember anything like that?
I quite honestly don't remember that one particularly. Do you know what time frame that was?
Over 2 years ago, so please forgive me, I'm jogging your memory way back there.
Yeah, I don't remember what I did yesterday.
I've got one of our team members who is extraordinarily versed in neural anatomy, and he's quite appreciative of your lion frequency meditations and has had some good results with them, so I thank you for that.
Okay.
You made his day more than one time.
Good.
In that regard, from what I've seen, you seem to have a lot of tools and toys that would work well with radionics. And a mutual friend of ours, Ari, mentioned you had an interest in it. Have you been playing with radionics lately?
I haven't used it in quite some time, basically because I just haven't had a chance to do so, but I do have quite a few radionics machines here. I actually used to teach how to use them, and Ari and his group built some of them for me, which are very, very unique and powerful. But, of course, technically in the United States, radionics is only to be used for entertainment purposes only. Otherwise, it's illegal.
I know. And,
well, they are groovy.
and we won't go into all the fun uses outside of health that we both know about. Next question. There was something that had happened a long time ago to me when I did my first astral projection, and we're talking way back in the late 70s. And I had launched, I went out past the atmosphere, and when I got close to the moon, I was told to go back. And at that time, I was young and impressionable. I thought I was hearing the voice of God or something, and I said, okay, fine, I'll go back. All right, I'll be a good boy. And then years later, John Lear came on the radio and said that one of the original remote viewing team had been following a soul as it left the planet and ran into the same issue, and the closer he got to the moon, the louder that voice became, and that's basically what happened to me. Now, normally, I would not accept that as data, except that I had the same experience many years earlier. So I'm wondering if you know anything regarding that.
The moon actually has a perimeter intruder detection device, if you will. What you heard and what the other person heard was actually computer-generated warning. It wasn't a general monitoring by an individual. The moon contains a lot of technology, both human and non-human. There have been bases from the Earth on the moon since 1957, and also on Mars. And so these are used for, let's say, border patrol of the solar system, and to contain human consciousness and physicality on the planet until such time they're allowed to leave.
What I find interesting that I don't have a theory on, and maybe you do, is when Ingo Swann and I both have remote viewed Mars, we found similar things there with the occupation of Mars. And I'm wondering why they don't have a similar detection scheme, because in remote viewing, we had no trouble intruding and actually doing reconnaissance there.
The technology on Mars has been damaged, or had been damaged a long time ago, and is being rebuilt. And that is why they're giving false information about the face on Mars, the pyramids on Mars, the Cydonia Plateau, all of the so-called anomalous findings. Like, for example, yesterday they showed the Curiosity rover found some kind of metallic-looking thing in the sand, and then they're telling people on Earth that it is a natural part of the Martian soil. So there's a lot of cover-up going on up there, and there's also a lot of battles going on, because from what you may have seen on my website, there is an amassing of some kind of a fleet in the Kuiper Belt just beyond our solar system. The Kuiper Belt is using some of the inner planets to monitor the Earth, and the Illuminati are very concerned about this and trying to beef up their security systems.
The actual battles I have seen, that's something that we've known about for about 15 years now. But very interesting that that's what they're doing. So I look forward to using our radionics. And I also use the Shiva neural stimulation system for breaking some of these barriers. So I'm going to look forward to actually bypassing the moon's defenses and see if I can get in there. We'll see just how tight they are.
Mm-hmm.
Another question is, and this comes from something that we found out a long time ago, that they were using hyperspace pathways and alignments astrologically to get better yields out of atomic weapons. And we're noticing now that many pathways are opening up here in the United States and around the globe because of different alignments. Can you speak to that?
Well, actually, I just had a meeting in Moscow with a couple who's quite involved in that. And yes, that also is connected to the Hadron Collider in Geneva and used to collapse certain parallel universes in on this one or merge them together.
Are they attempting to make a dual timeline, or are they attempting just to nullify one?
Well, they're attempting to enhance this one by bringing in others where they have power.
Right, so they get a control mechanism that works better here. Okay.
Yes, exactly, correct. And nuclear experiments, or I should say explosions, can rip a hole in the time-space continuum and create a vortex, so that makes things easier to hook into.
We're working with a technology called the paranormal Shakti, which allows you to sensitize regions of the brain to phenomena such as this, or desensitize it. And so our theory is if they are attempting to, shall we say, open or thin the portal barriers, we are thinking that we're going to have some leeway with that using these devices to be able to sense what they're doing ahead of time. Can you speak at all to brain regions that actually are efficient in that regard?
Well, actually, you need to access the reptilian brainstem, which is the core foundation of the personality, a soul personality, and can connect very easily to the non-physical. So by using certain techniques, which I describe in my books and in my seminars, you would be able to enhance the ability to tap into what you're trying to do. Well, and you also have to connect the brainstem to the pineal gland.
Okay, that we don't have any trouble with because we have EEG traces of most of those brain regions. We'll take a look at some of your data in the book, and we'll see if we can't put together a program for that particular item. So I appreciate that. That's very helpful for us.
Cool. Is that all you had, Jeff?
That's all I've got.
Very groovy. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, take it easy, dear. All right. There were some questions that I got from some of our members in our Facebook page, and one of them was, do weaponized aerosols interact with HARP to affect our minds? Who was actually spraying these aerosols? This person says, I'm told the people doing this are the contractors for the Office of Navy Intelligence under the direction of the Archbishop of New York, Timothy Dolan.
Well, it goes way beyond that. This is a global perpetrator, and yes, these aerosol sprayings are designed to change DNA, change your brain chemicals, change atmospheric conditions. There's a lot more to it than just what was mentioned. However, if you keep yourself in a violet protection and use the brown merger symbol that I write about in some of my books, then this will not have an effect on you. I also recommend taking sea salt baths and putting 1 cup of organic white vinegar and 1 cup of organic baking soda into the sea salt, and that will purge the residue of all of this out of your body if you do this frequently.
Interesting. I've used the salts before, but I've never thought about putting the rest of it in there.
Yeah, actually that formula recreates the original seawater.
Vinegar does a lot of things cool, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it has to be organic.
Okay, very interesting. Another question was, to what extent do you use your hypnosis programs to deprogram people?
I do not use hypnosis at all.
Okay.
I don't trust it, and I think that it is primitive.
How do you suggest people try to break free from programming if they've been involved in some of these projects?
Well, yeah, I have a series of books that describe that. You know, it's quite a long, lengthy protocol, and it depends on which programs you have, which protocols you would use. So, yeah, it's absolutely possible, but you have to be proactive and do it. You can't just sit still. You have to mentally and physically do your work.
And what if they don't know, if they're not quite sure exactly what programs they need deprogramming from? Could they mail you and get some help that way from someone?
Well, I do programming scans to see what people have so that they know what to work on.
And that's the visual thing, right? You have to be in person, don't you?
No, not at all. I can do that, just with their birth name and birth date.
Oh, I'll have to talk to you later. See what you think about me.
Oh my God, we don't have enough time today.
I'm told that you also do work on energy levels as far as multidimensional beings. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so, if I'm understanding what the question is.
I don't like invoking demons' names. I don't even like saying the word demon.
Well, if you're referring to demonic attachments, yes, I do work on that as well. And it's also part of Moonchild programming, where in the second trimester of pregnancy, the fetus is connected to a lower astral entity. And so there is the programming you can do for that as well.
Is that connected to the archons?
That's another topic altogether. I think a lot of people out there do reading and they don't understand what they're reading and they lump everything together.
Right. I was just wondering if some of that had something to do with children being born that lack that spark of life.
Well, that's all part of the genetic manipulation and genetic programming, and that's why they are pushing the word zombie out there these days, because they're trying to activate those programs.
There's a demon, and please protect me after I say this because I don't like saying demon names. Azazel.
Yeah, what about him?
What does that mean to you? What kind of work do you do with Azazel?
I don't do any work with it, but I do deprogramming for people who are connected to that.
Who have been programmed by way of conjuring that entity? Is that what you mean?
Well, there's a lot of people out there that think it's really cool to do satanic rituals and ceremonies and invoke these things.
Open doors they don't know how to close.
That's right, and that's a very silly thing to do. But, people do those kind of things. And then, unfortunately, they run to me to fix it, and it isn't so easy.
How is it that you would go about fixing? Could you break maybe a case study down? You don't have to say anyone's name.
It's a procedure, and it wouldn't make any sense for me to talk about that on the air. Okay. But I do use frequencies that these creatures, these entities cannot stay in this frequency.
I gotcha. Okay.
It's kind of like a frequency that pushes out the negative.
I got a quick question, Katz. If you
go right ahead, hon.
We can jump back to the cryptozoology stuff because I had kind of an epiphany. The black-eyed kid syndrome, I'm wondering if maybe they aren't infected with the intelligent black goo.
That's true, but a lot of them also have alien genetics in them that cause that to occur as well. So you have to go case by case and see which one each individual is.
As far as ET human characteristics that are left in us, I know you mentioned the web beat earlier in one of your YouTube links, and you said that was from the mermaid DNA. Is there a list of characteristics that coincide with ET races that you know of?
We all have that. I mean, human beings are not natural race. We have the genetics of other beings in us. So all human beings are alien. And I do have to make a distinction between alien and ET because they're two different things. An alien is a physical being who comes from another world in this universe. And ET could be a borderline physical, non-physical that could be from another dimension or time-space. So when we use these terms legally, we have to make that distinction.
Yes, I'm glad you did that. Do you want to talk about the Illuminati for a bit?
Well, why not, since they're the main topic anyway around here. And just as a baseline for those who may not know about it, they are the 13 families that control the Earth and all of its resources, and they go back all the way to the Merovingian times and the invasion of the Khazars into Europe that mixed with the remnants of the Magdalene frequency. And the Illuminati, by the way, do claim descendancy from Christ, and that makes them, the reasons why they're allowed to rule the world. And so they are the ones who pull all the strings. They don't recognize any borders. They don't really care about any religion or politics. It's just that's all for public consumption. And so when we see American politics as we are now, it's kind of almost humorous to view this because it doesn't matter who wins. You don't vote for anybody. You might think you vote for people, but sometimes the voting machine isn't even connected to anything.
Rand is right there with you on that topic.
Yeah, I like your analogy, how you say it's about the same as pushing the lever on your toilet.
Yeah, well, it's actually better to push a lever on your toilet because then you know where that crap is going.
Yeah.
And I say, they say, who do you think is going to win, Obama or Romney? Who's going to? I said, well, same crap, different toilet. What's the difference?
Exactly.
Someone wanted to know in the chat room, if you learn vibration frequency patterns, can you move large objects distances based on what it takes to fully vibrate them?
Well, you can do anything with the mind. If you open up the 90% of the brain you don't use and the 97% of your DNA that you don't use, there is amazing abilities that we all have, including moving objects, bilocating, floating, flying, whatever you can imagine. We can do it.
What are some of your abilities, Stuart? I know you mentioned a couple of them. I'm sure you have many more because you're very Jedi. I don't have any. All I have is a belly ring.
Well, my main claim to fame with my so-called abilities is to read energy fields, to tap into mind patterns, the DNA, look at the chakra system. I basically can do what an MRI machine can do. Only difference is I can also recommend the cure to fix whatever it is that's not right. I also can tap into timelines where you have alternate existences, other lifetimes, that sort of thing. I have also been known to help create earthquakes and storms and move them and that kind of weather manipulation. I've done that. All kinds of things.
Let's talk some more about ways people can deprogram themselves and how you can help them.
Well, first thing is they need to learn how to balance the two hemispheres of the brain, which is the T-bar method that I teach. And once they learn how to balance the brain, they then need to keep themselves in a violet protection because ELF, a microwave, cannot penetrate a violet energy field. And then the very basic technique of using the brown merger symbol, which people can look up online, which helps to start the reintegration process of the fragmented personality. So that's a very basic method of deprogramming. And then to visualize the programming cube, which is 13 by 13 by 13 at the pineal gland, flush it with violet, put brown mergers through it, start breaking it down. And then, of course, I have separate deprogramming techniques for each type of program that might be in you, whether it's Monarch, Green Star, New World Order, End Times, New World Religion. There's so many, and each has subcategories, and so I have tailored deprogramming techniques for each one of them. You can't do everything at once. I do recommend that people keep a journal of their deprogramming and work on that every day, but not to get overwhelmed by it. And usually, once you start the process of deprogramming, there will be programming sabotage, where your internal programmer will kick in and try to divert you from completing the process. And unfortunately, if you're very deeply programmed, or what I call specifically programmed, and you get too far with removing it, then suicide programming can kick in when you become a liability. So there's a lot of categories to look at. There's a lot of functions to take into consideration, and I call it basically an archaeological dig of the mind. You have to go very slowly so you don't damage anything. You have to go back to where you left off so that you know where to pick up. It's very important that you catalog everything you do, every information that you receive. Sometimes when you do deprogramming, you don't get the information right away. Sometimes it may come in a dream state or in a flash, days or weeks later. So there's a lot to consider when starting this process. And then everybody, all 7.3 billion people on the earth, are programmed to one degree or another. About 15% have specific or deep programming. And while 15% may not seem like a lot, when you take 15% of 7.3 billion people, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, sure is. Do you think that they do this in ways to stunt your Kundalini from rising?
Well, Kundalini energy is genetically programmed in you. In other words, you inherit that ability. Not everybody is going to reach full potential in this lifetime. It should be a slow, natural process over the course of a lifetime. It should never be forced artificially or prematurely. So when I see all these topics like Kundalini Yoga and Kundalini this or that, that's very dangerous, because basically it's like lighting a match on dynamite and letting it explode when it may not be ready to do so.
Right.
So I tell people, just do your work, mental work. Let things happen naturally over your lifetime. Don't force anything.
That's very responsible of you.
Well, I mean that's just common sense.
Yeah.
To do it that way, because I see so many people out there, so-called psychics or energy workers, and they say, "Oh, I'll remove a curse, or I'll heal you." Nobody can do that. you have to do that on your own. You know, it's like I can make very wonderful dinner for you, but you have to eat it. I can't eat it for you. And so it's like that with energy. You have to work on your own stuff.
Absolutely. Divinity is not for sale.
No one can give it to you or take it away from you.
Most definitely.
Stuart, in terms of the Montauk project, were you actually there when it all came to an end, when the Monster Jr. just destroyed the facility, or is that accurate? Because I read that book by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon. Was their depiction of that relatively accurate? Were you there when that happened?
I wasn't at the base when it happened, but I was within an hour and a half away from there, and I knew something happened, but I didn't know what it was. But the description of what what happened is basically correct, although over the years I've heard several different versions of it. And the Montauk Chronicles movie that's just come out, which I am in, by the way, does replay that or describes that, what's the word I'm looking for, a recreation of what happened then.
Okay, and the movie actually is out. I've been waiting for that.
Yeah, in fact, I did.
Okay, awesome.
I was at the premiere in Montauk in May, and then I took the movie to Cape Town, South Africa, and premiered it there. And in 2 weeks, I'm premiering it in Bangkok for Asia.
Wow. Now, do you feel they're still doing stuff at that site underground? Do you think there's still something going on, or did they move it to another location?
It's not what it was. What they're doing there now is a lot of weather manipulation and even some technological experimentation, but there's no human subjects that I know of there. The mind control, programming, all of that is now in other locations globally. It's been sophisticated. A lot of it is done by satellite transmission. So the Montauk base is not what it was, but there is some activity going on there still of another nature.
Sure.
There's another question that someone put in from the chat room. Are there any whistleblowers that you know that are in the public eye who, in your opinion, seem to be deliberately programming people or confusing us with what you know is definite disinformation, i.e. people you'd advise us to ignore?
Oh, there's a lot of those, but I'm not going to name them.
Yeah, okay.
Because I'm not going to start, that kind of thing. The people who know my work know what I'm talking about. There's more people like that than not. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that's why my favorite word is discern, discern, discern. It's very important. Yeah. And you have to do the work so you're able to discern.
Exactly correct.
Yes, sir.
I even tell people, don't even listen to me. Do your own research and find out for yourself.
Yeah, use your body, use your mind, use all of your senses when you're trying to figure out if somebody's got good intentions or bad intentions.
Exactly.
And usually, you end up being right. You have to listen to your inner voice.
Yes, correct. And always the first answer is the right answer.
Absolutely. I find it fascinating, the topic of these underground bases. What do you think? I know you think they're being used for several different things.
Oh, there's many. I mean, there's I think the last I heard that there was close to 3,000 underground bases around the world. Some of them are used for genetic manipulation, some for weaponry, some for time travel, some for deep space exploration. You name it, there's a base for it.
What kinds of things do you think are going on now as far as genetic manipulation in these bases?
Well, as far as these bases are concerned, the genetic manipulation, they are trying to create beings, or I should say slave races, that can work in certain conditions without the use of apparatus. So, for example, to create human hybrids that can work under the ocean, that could work on high mountaintops, that can work in hot places, cold places, etc. That's some of what's going on. They're also trying to open up the reptilian DNA in human beings so that the programming can be more easily downloaded. They're also trying to manipulate the fertility and digestive systems of people so that they can control the population in many different ways. And they're also trying to open up any person that has dolphin DNA because they would become more open, psychic, aware, for example. and then those people would be diagnosed as autistic or ADD and given drugs to keep them down. So that's, in a nutshell, some of the things that are going on.
I know you say that West Virginia is pretty much hollow underneath that mountain. Is that true?
I never had any good experiences in West Virginia. Under West Virginia is the largest underground city in the world. It's basically hollow. Okay, let's go to another nice topic, Denver Airport. And, of course, out front is a gigantic horse statue and a sign that says, dedicated to the people of Denver by the New World Airport Authority. Who the heck is that? I never heard of them before, but they dedicated this statue in the airport, and the airport's many, many, many miles out of town. The old airport was much closer. There is enough concrete underneath Denver Airport to build a 6-lane highway from Denver to Chicago and back again. So what is under there that required all that concrete? And there's many, many caverns and tunnels and that kind of thing. And of course, at baggage claim number 17, which I took a picture of it, is a painting that shows a little German blonde-headed kid in lederhosen standing with a sword over dead minority women in coffins with dead babies.
I don't even know how they get away with making a mural like that in a public airport. It blows my mind.
Well, there it is. You know, the Denver airport is basically a prototype of the new spaceports that will be built around the world in the near future.
They probably do it for some kind of ritual purpose of putting it right in our faces. I'm sure it feeds them somehow.
Yeah, well, basically, someone mentioned earlier in the show that you hide things in plain sight, right in front of your nose, because you never look right there. It's too obvious.
Right. Someone had a question. Could someone ever stumble upon a base, or are they too well hidden in military facilities?
Yeah. No, you're not going to stumble upon a base. They're very well protected. They're very deep in the ground. There's a lot of security. You can't just accidentally walk in. So that's not going to happen.
Do you think that some of these missiles silos that they're turning into homes on underground were once used for testing facilities?
Well, they were used for connections to the inner Earth and to other underground bases, and yes, were used for testing of all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's not just missiles, I'm sure.
No.
There's another question for you. What are your thoughts on transhumanism? Is it a good transition for the human race to head towards bio-nanotechnology?
Well, no. I don't believe that's a good direction in which to head.
Me either.
Because, first of all, human psyche is not ready for such a thing. And doing this is artificial, which means it's all about programming and mind control. So it's not a good thing.
I have to agree.
I've heard that there are underground facilities where there's lots of caged humans, which are either runaways or homeless, and they're actually food for aliens, and that we're not the top of the food chain. I know that's kind of tough for some people to hear. I'm just curious if that's something you might know about.
Yeah, absolutely. That is correct. But what I will tell you is most of those were never in society anyway. This is something that's been going on for centuries underneath the earth, where they have bred people just for that purpose, and they never see the light of day, basically. Yes, there are times when they do take people from the surface on some occasions, but most of what you discuss here is bred purposely for that reason.
And one more quick one for my own personal thing. I really want to expand my own gifts, my abilities, but in all of the material that you have, what would be the best thing to start with to look at enhancing my abilities?
I would recommend the Hyperspace Helper book and the DVDs on hyperspace and oversoul basics. That's a good place to start.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any thoughts on where the Vatican is going to go after?
Hopefully sink into hell where it came from.
Yeah, I agree. I always say if they just sell the crown jewels and the Vatican jewels, there would be no hunger and everybody would have a home to live in on this planet.
Catholic Church is the largest real estate owner on the earth. And by the way, people, why do they call it the Vatican? It was built on a location by the Etruscans where they had a cemetery dedicated to dead soldiers, and the guardian of the dead soldiers was an astral entity called Vaticana. And so when the Romans came to this region, they occupied these hills of Vaticana, the cemetery. And when the church was established, they built the Vatican on top of it, and that's why they call it the Vatican. It was named after a demonic entity called Vaticana.
Wow, that's fascinating. Do you have any thoughts about the Bavarian Illuminati, Stewart?
Well, that's another whole big topic, because there's no really difference between the Bavarian Illuminati and other Illuminati, except that there is a branch located underneath Bavaria, which is part of the Fourth Reich, which is connected to what's going on in Antarctica and in the Kuiper Belt. So there's that connection there to Bavaria.
Fascinating. I would like you to mention anything you'd like to mention in closing, Stewart, with our audience, where they can see your website and take advantage of some of your products.
They can go to expansions.com. We have daily news updates. We have forums. We have everything you can imagine, all kinds of health products and services. We are also, next week I leave for LA and from there to Bangkok, where I'll be doing seminars and movie premiere and consultations. In December, we're going for a very interesting holiday trip where people are welcome to join us to Suriname and Aruba. We'll also be going to French Guiana to do some exploration of some mysterious sites and look at what's going on underneath and above the ground in those locations. And in January, I am having my week-long intensive training session where I teach people to do what I do. All of that is available, the details on expansions.com. So please go take a look and read us every day.
Very great. Thank you, Stewart. You've been a very fun, playful guest.
Well, I'm glad you appreciate my sense of humor. It's not politically correct, but I don't care.
It's all good.
I just want to say a very sincere thank you. It's been a great show. My mind is blown out. So
Thank you. And the good thing is that you had a mind to blow out. And I appreciate both of you, and I thank you for this opportunity to express myself.
I'm sure you need some much-needed family time, so thanks for hanging out with us tonight, Stewart. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.